inside China's debt traps and how China keeps vulnerable countries in debt. Here you have a map of China's Silk Road initiative, but I just want to say in passing, I read an article a couple of days ago how Chinese are now colonizing Cuba to the south of the United States, in Florida. Yes, Cuba is a very interesting country for the communist Chinese, and they seem to be taking over. Now, China is among the world's largest superpowers and one of the biggest creditor nations. Its lending practices to poorest developing countries has drawn considerable criticism. And they're also lending, they're also strengthening the infrastructure of these poor countries, third world countries. China has been criticized for its practice of debt trapping developing countries. It's a practice where they give money to the poorest countries, which are then indebted to China, meaning it can apply pressure for their support in international affairs as well. In November 2021, MI6 Chief Richard Moore warned in his first broadcast interview that China is, quote, trying to use influence through its economic policies to try and get people on the hook, end quote. So what is a debt trap? Critics of China claim the superpower lends money to other countries in need of developing infrastructure, funding armed forces, and paying off their debt, which end up having to relinquish control of key assets if they cannot meet the debt repayments. Well, this is also what the International Monetary Fund is doing. They ask countries that can't pay their debt to sell off domestic government entities. Now, China has long denied that it's debt trapping countries, but the figure is likely to be significantly higher, and China does not publish records of its foreign loans, as we know. Many of its contracts also contain non-disclosure agreements, so the countries that go into agreements with China can't give any information as to what they're doing with China. So these non-disclosure agreements prevent borrowers from revealing the details of their agreements with China. Research aid by Aid Data, it's an international development body in the US, found that half of China's lending to developing countries is not reported in official debt statistics. Some of these loans are kept off government balance sheets because they are directed to state-owned companies and banks, joint ventures, or private institutions rather than traveling directly between governments. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box. Currently, there are about more than 40 low and middle income countries that have debt exposure to Chinese lenders of more than 10% of the size of their national gross domestic product as a result of so-called hidden debt. And also, China tends to lend at higher rates of interest than Western governments. Obviously, if these countries can't get a loan from the Western governments, they're going to pay a high interest rate to get it from China. Loans are close to commercial market rates at about 4% and about 4 times that of a typical loan from the World Bank or an individual country such as Germany. The repayment period for a Chinese loan is usually shorter as well. It's less than 10 years, so it's closer to current loans instead of long-term loans, compared to 28 years for other lenders' loans to developing countries. Djibouti, Laos, Zambia, Kyrgyzstan all currently have debts to China equivalent to at least 20% of their annual GDP. Much of the debt owed to China relates to large infrastructure projects like roads, railways, ports, etc., and also to the mining and energy industry under President Xi Jinping Belt and Road Initiative, the Silk Road. And one of the starkest examples of debt trapping country is Sri Lanka. It embarked on the Hambantota port project with Chinese backed in the mid-2000s, and the billion-dollar project using loans and contractors from China was mired with issues and left the island nation saddled with considerable spiraling debt. China eventually agreed to take 70% stake in the port on a 99-year lease, with the caveat of further Chinese investment in Sri Lanka. This is by Express UK, Alice Hickman. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support.